United Nations special procedures consist of primarily special rapporteurs, independent experts, and working groups dealing with very sensitive but important topics concerning human rights. They've existed for decades, and they write their own reports. Some are thematic by nature, covering, for example, the issue of sale of children, perhaps, or sexual orientation and gender identity. Others are concentrating more on country situations, such as DP Korea and other sensitive country-specific situations. From the angle of the value added of special procedures interrelated with children, it's important to recognize that, number one, the people who help as special procedures, mandate holders, they are pro bono independent experts. They come from outside the UN system, they come and help pro bono, and they prepare their reports in an independent manner. Number two, the reports catalyzed by going to the UN system, particularly Geneva, Human Rights Council, perhaps New York, such as General Assembly, and even upwards to the Security Council, and to be borne in mind at the local level by UN country teams. So there's a sort of catalytic impact of mobilizing not only the UN community, but also the global community, global and local, in terms of highlighting key issues, also pertaining to children. And thirdly, the special procedures themselves take communications from people. They accept complaints and then they liaise with the countries concerned so as to seek clarification and justice for those impacted upon under their mandates in regard to human rights transgressions or discrepancies or violations. With that understanding, it's important also that these procedures are not stagnant procedures. They move. They can go to countries upon invitation, and they can catalyze by working with the country level particularly, if they are enabled to enter those countries. And even if they're not able to enter some countries, these procedures can still cover situations by accessing those who've been through certain country experiences, such as refugees, displaced persons, and beyond. So that is the system writ large under the United Nations, which now stands at nearly 60 mandates, ranging from thematic mandates to specific country mandates. From the angle of children, and particularly deprivation of liberty, of course, many of these mandates cover children's related issues. Most recently, in the past 10 years, I was the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in DPR Korea. And one of the issues there was prison conditions and also the punishments meted out not only to the parents, but also collective punishment, covering also children. So that mandate would have covered various specifics as regards children deprived of liberty. Or another angle during my time was also the treatment of children with disabilities or persons with disabilities in terms of invisibility, and also the need for transparency and a human rights-centered approach to those suffering from both physical and mental disabilities. So that mandate, under my humble remit, was already covering elements of deprivation of liberty. More recently, I undertook the mandate of the UN Independent Expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And of course, there were plenty of cases, situations where adults or children would be impacted upon by violence and discrimination in relation to their gender identity, their gender diversity, perhaps through the regrettable criminalization of consensual same-sex relations, perhaps through the manifestation of gender identity, which might be different from the sex assigned at birth, or perhaps just from incrimination through perceived sense of being different, rather than having done something illegal, so to speak, according to national law. So the mandate itself also covered children who might land up in situations of deprivation of liberty. Those are little examples out of nearly 60 mandates that exist today. And of course, a very important issue is to see the system as based upon components which are complementary. Different mandates, different angles, but they can integrate cross-cutting issues, including gender diversity, which they do, and which they can do even more. I think, as always, with any study, with any report, we must see the information as a means to an end, and not just as an end in itself, which means that the information must be well communicated, must be well analyzed, well documented, evidence-based as best we can, but also used as a tool of advocacy for change, constructive change on behalf of children and their families. And ultimately, in terms of human rights implementation, we cannot escape from the fact that even though we have international standards, we have some regional setups that can help, the crunch is really implementation at the national level. And it is the state's responsibility, primary responsibility, to implement human rights. And in that perspective, the transparency that will come through this study will try to nurture entry points for better protection, improved protection of human rights, the totality of human rights, civil, political, economic, social, cultural, particularly pertaining to children, and the impact of deprivation of liberty, so as to improve all the entry points which interlink with implementation. The needed better laws, or reform not so good laws, better policies, reform not so good policies, better enforcement, case enforcement, better programming, child sensitive, better resourcing, improved mechanisms and personnel, improved data, disaggregation and monitoring, improved mechanisms at the local level, particularly with public participation, education, capacity building, improved, broadened spaces for participation and networking, particularly the role of civil society and, very importantly, the children and the families themselves. And to me, as with many situations, including studies concerning children, while we all advocate the best interests of the child as a primordial concern, I think very importantly interlinked with that is the principle of non-discrimination, the principle of the right to life, survival, development, and interlinked with all of that, the child's voice, child participation and respect for the child's views. So the test is to have a holistic and integrated approach, particularly to reflect the voices and experiences of the children themselves. And I hope very much that we will be able to support and carry through more entry points where we involve children very directly, with due regard to protection of their privacy, of course, but certainly to reflect the child-responsive choices and voices that come through our networking with the children at large, while not forgetting the broader perspective also of the family and the community, all of which should be nurtured to be more child-responsive, whether at the local level, the regional level, and or at the global level. Thank you.